Perfect. Carolyn, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Two quick things I want to throw out based on your opening notes that I think might be of interest. Early next year, I have a new book coming out called Why We Love Birds, and I interviewed 52 birders from across the country, many of whom you guys would know if we got into the names, and maybe we will at the end. But you mentioned hummingbirds, Carolyn, in your opening notes there. And I will tell you that I interviewed 52 birders from around the country, and I asked each of them the same five questions. And not one birder, one time, a single time, was the word hummingbird mentioned. It never came up as a spark bird, a favorite bird, a nemesis bird, a favorite birding day, a quick side story. Never once. You would never know that hummingbirds existed if you went through the transcripts. And then also you mentioned going looking for peregrines.
Yes.
So if any of your if anybody watching here tonight, there is a book by J.A. Baker. It's called Peregrine, British writer. He wrote it in 1967. As a matter of fact, that's what I was reading, Carolyn, before you and I got online together, is that book. It's a terrific book. It is, and it is 100% about peregrine falcons in a 3 or 4 month period where this author did nothing but spend all day, every day, hiking around looking at peregrine falcons in Great Britain. And he writes about it, and he writes it poetically and brilliantly. And so if you have peregrine fans there, that would be something you might want to consider, is that.
Yeah.
So with that, we will shift over to the actual reason that you had me here tonight. I want to thank everybody for joining us, most especially the people at Lawrence Erickson's phone who appear incredibly comfortable on their couch with a blanket. That's where I would like to be. I assume that's going to be the last shot we have of them on the couch with the blanket. But that being said, thanks to everybody for being here tonight. I always appreciate it. And we're going to talk about this book, Raptor Quest. This book and the photos inside it, some of which I'm going to share with you guys tonight, are a big part of the journey that I took. And more important than that, actually, are the people that I met along the way. And I'm going to be talking about some of those people here this evening and sharing some stories. So we can have some fun with this. I will be happy to answer questions at the end for as long as people want to ask them. And I find it's an interesting thing when I speak to Audubon clubs, and I get to do it fairly often. Sometimes there are almost no questions, and then sometimes there's just, once a couple people get going, then everybody comes in with their
Did
questions.
you make a
So,
masala dosa?
and I am happy to stay and answer them as long as you guys keep going. A little background: my wife and I retired to South Carolina 6 years ago. We had spent our entire lives in Southern California and decided to retire out here. So we bought a house on a lake. We'd never been here. We'd never seen the house. We bought it online. A bit of a gamble, but it's a gamble that worked out pretty well. So we're pretty happy with it. And I was not a birder when we moved here. Carol and I were talking early before the presentation, and I'm a brand new birder. I started 6 years ago, and I've enthusiastically embraced it and absolutely love it. And let us hold on. There we go. So the very first day that we were at our house, about 6 months after we bought it, the real estate agent was showing us around, and this bald eagle flew across the lake. We live right on a lake, and landed in a pine tree in our backyard on the lake's edge. And I took this picture. I was not a photographer at the time, and I wasn't a birder, but come on, you got to love bald eagles. So I took the shot, and I think it was a really great way to celebrate our first day here. One of my regrets of not being a birder earlier is my wife and I have had the pleasure of having been to all 50 states at least twice, and about 35 or 40 different countries. I can't even imagine how many birds I saw and didn't really pay attention to, or how many I could have seen had I been paying attention. But nonetheless, I'm trying to make up for lost time. This book, Raptor Quest, is my 55th published book in the last 10 years. That's what I started doing when I retired, and I absolutely love it. I had never written a book about birds before, and not being an ornithologist or a scientist, I was a little concerned about what I would write about. And it was my son who said, "Hey, Dad, remember that movie, The Big Year?" And I don't know how many of you have seen it, but I'm guessing since you're birders, a bunch of you, there aren't a lot of birding movies that come out. And so we went in and watched that movie as a family and very much enjoyed it. We'd seen it when it came out in 2011 and enjoyed it again. And when the movie ended, I'm sitting there with my wife and my son and my daughter. And I said, you know what? I think that big year sounds like a great idea. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go do a big year. That'll be how I start off my retirement. And my wife looked at me and she said, do you remember what happened to the Owen Wilson character? And if you haven't seen the movie or you don't remember, Owen Wilson got divorced because of his birding fascination and placing it over his wife. So we modified it. We came up with an idea that I could do a raptor big year. There are 53 raptors that call the lower 48 states home. And that seemed like a very reasonable thing to me in my ignorance and sweet innocence of being a new birder. And so that was what I decided to tackle. It wound up taking longer than I thought. It was 17 months, not a year. And that's because I completely underestimated the difficulty of finding some of the winter owls. And so I had to wait for winter to cycle back around again. It never really entered my mind that I would go places and the birds I wanted to see wouldn't be there. That was not a concept I was familiar with. Rapidly became familiar with it, but I wasn't familiar with it then. One of the things that I learned early on in my research about raptors um, is that there is no generally accepted definition of raptors. The scientific community has not arrived at a definition that they're comfortable with. Some organizations and some prominent individuals have definitions, but they are not consistent. So some of those definitions would include birds that aren't included on this list, and some of the definitions would exclude birds that are on this list. And other birds, corvids, hummingbirds, gulls, they have clearly defined scientific definitions. You are a gull if, and you are not a gull if. Not the case with raptors. I'm reminded in 1964, Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart was asked to define pornography. And he said he couldn't do it, but he knew it when he saw it. And I think that's the way it is with raptors. They're kind of hard to define definitively, but everybody knows one when they see them. Now, for me, if I was to do this again, I would not include vultures. I would only have 50. I would have the 19 owls and 31 diurnals. And by the way, for the hardcore birders, I recognize that a couple of the owls are also diurnals. Please allow me that split because I just tried to simplify the categories. But I would not include the black and the turkey and the California condor. Not because I don't think they're important. As a matter of fact, I think the black and the turkey might be the most important birds in the country for the work they do on carrion cleanup and disease prevention. I just don't think they're raptors. But that's me. There are other battles going on now. There's Harlan's hawks. I was up in Montana and Idaho and well, some other states in Washington working on another book in December and saw a number of Harlan's hawks. If you haven't seen them or aren't familiar, they are a subspecies of red-tailed hawk, although none of them have red tails. And there are battles now to try to get them split. What's interesting is they have already been lumped and split 3 times. They've been a red-tailed hawk subspecies. They've been their own species. They've been the da-da-da. It's the politics of the boards that make those decisions. But I'm hoping they're split out because I think they should be. And then there are other birds that were interesting as I talked to experts around the country during my year and a half working on this. The hook-billed kite, it's really more of an occasional visitor into Texas from Mexico. And then some of those dang winter owls that I had to chase around, like northern hawk and snowy and great gray, really those are Canadian owls. But this is America, so we claim them. We claim all of them. And this is how we get to the 53 that I was chasing. And by the way, in all my research, 98% of the people that took the time to list the raptors in this country listed these 53. So that's pretty universally accepted, although not clearly defined. The one exception to that, by the way, is in Hawaii. Hawaii has 3 raptors. They have a full barn owl, exactly the same as our barn owl. They have a short-eared owl, which is another one where there is already a paper out trying to get it split from a subspecies to its own species. Having spent some time with the Hawaiian short-eared owl, I think that should happen. It's got different vocalization, different hunting patterns. It is not crepuscular like our short-eared owl here, but that'll be a political battle. But Hawaii does have an endemic bird, an endemic raptor. And they must have, it's a hawk, and they must have spent months coming up with the name. And when they finally resolved that, they called it the Hawaiian hawk, which is just an act of genius for a hawk found in Hawaii. But nonetheless, that's an endemic hawk to Hawaii, predominantly on the Big Island, which is also where you find most of the short-eared owls. This was my canvas, the lower 48 states. As I mentioned, the Hawaiian hawk is unique. Alaska has no raptors that we don't have in the lower 48. In some cases, they have more of them. They do get rarities coming across the Bering Straits, but there is nothing up there different than what we have down here. So I focused on the lower 48. And I had an absolute blast, even preparing the work. 20 of the 53 raptors can be found in all 48 states. Now, obviously, different amounts in different states and during seasons and breeding and migration and overwintering and permanent residence and the whole thing. But 20 of the 53 can be found in all 48 states. And by the way, I don't quote a lot of numbers in this presentation, but all the ones that I do regarding birds come from eBird, and they all come from a 5-year period, which is 2018 to 2022. And just so you know where those numbers are coming from. There's a possibility that things have changed in the 3 years since I did the research, and there's a possibility that things were different. But I figured to do a current 5-year block would be a really good process. So that's what I went with. Excuse me. There are 2 of the 53 raptors that have been found in 47 of the 48 states, and they have both skipped Louisiana. I don't know if they don't speak French or they don't like Cajun food or what it is, but they have not gone to Louisiana, or they've not been recorded there recently. And those are the northern goshawk, now the American goshawk, and the northern saw-whet owl. Now, the northern saw-whet owl, I imagine a lot of you are familiar with Scott Weidensaul, one of our best birding authors, great writer, and he's become a friend of mine. And he tells a story about John James Audubon, who claimed that he saw a northern saw-whet owl in Louisiana, painted it in Louisiana, and named it the Acadian owl because of all of that. And Scott, who's a very nice guy, says that the furthest I'll go on that is that I believe that Mr. Audubon was an unreliable narrator and that there has not been a northern saw-whet owl in Louisiana. Of course, Mr. Audubon is not around to defend himself, so that's just the way it goes. There is one owl that has only skipped 2 states, Arizona and New Mexico. That is the snowy owl. So it has been seen in 47 of the 48. And 5 of our raptors are typically found in 3 states or fewer: the Aplomado falcon, the ferruginous pygmy owl, the whiskered screech owl, the hook-billed kite, and the white-tailed hawk. All 5 of those are found in 3 states or fewer, and all 5 of those are most readily found in Texas. Texas is a magnificent state for raptors. Florida, Texas, Montana, California, those are the leading states in the country for raptors. And with all due respect to your group, Texas is the king, because they get these ones that come in, or they'll get a bat falcon or a roadside hawk or whatever. It's just an unbelievable place for raptors. It's really quite fun. People ask me about my trip, what I did. So this is the distribution of Scott instead of the distribution of the birds. Driving was absolutely my preferred mode of travel. I bought a brand new 4-wheel drive F-150 Ford truck for this adventure, and I drove it all over the country. I flew when I had to and drove when I could, and I went well over 100,000 miles in the year. So it was a really cool deal and a really cool trip. I did 7 cross-country trips. I did 13 round-trip flights. And I will share with you that in those 13 round trips, which totaled about 50 legs of flights, because so many of the places I went to are small, Wise River, Montana, or Harlingen, Texas, or whatever. And I start in Greenville, South Carolina. So I pick up a 20-minute leg at the beginning of every trip, flying from here to Atlanta and then starting the real flight. And I know people have a lot of complaints about the airlines and lost luggage and late flights and canceled flights. I will tell you that I flew these 50 legs of flights. Every single one of them left on time. 49 of the 50 landed on time, and they never lost my luggage once. So it was a dream for me. The one that didn't land on time was a late evening flight, about 10 or 11 o'clock at night, from Houston down to Harlingen, Texas. I was going down to find a hook-billed kite. It was my fourth trip down looking for that dang hook-billed kite. And as we get just a couple of minutes from what was scheduled to be the landing, the pilot comes on and says, "Hey, we've got a problem. There's an awful lot of fog here at the Harlingen airport, and we're not sure we can land. We've got about 15 minutes worth of fuel left, so we're going to circle around a couple of times and see if we can get in under that fog. And if we can't, we'll turn around and drive back to or fly back to Houston." Now, I mentioned I wasn't a scientist or an ornithologist. I'm also not a pilot or a mathematician. But if we took 45 minutes worth of fuel to get here and we only had 15 minutes worth of fuel left, it would seem to me we were going to come up a little short trying to fly back to Houston. Somebody must have mentioned that to the pilot because about 5 minutes later he came in and he said, "What I meant to say was we have 15 minutes worth of fuel to play with. We have plenty of fuel to get back to Houston," which is what we wound up doing. They flew us back down the next morning and I actually got my hook billed. So that was kind of neat. I was on the road for 25 weeks. I visited a total of 34 states. I traveled well over 100,000 miles. These are the states that I drove to most often: Florida, Texas, California, and Montana. And had a matter of fact, in December, I just did a trip: Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and then flew out of Sacramento to come home. Great birding trip and a great mammal trip. It was a lot of fun. I was blessed because on most of those trips, when I was driving, I was by myself, and never once did I break down or get a ticket or have a problem. It was just that was an absolute blessing. So I will take no credit for that, but be extremely relieved about it. Now, I did have these are the states that I flew to. These were the base states that I flew to, and then I would drive around a variety of states. These were the 34 states that I visited while I was out on the adventure. And then as far as the driving goes, the only minor incident that I had was this. I had flown into Kalispell to find a snowy owl. I'd landed on Monday, and there's a tiny little airport called the Flathead Lake Sky Ranch Airport, which is just south of Kalispell. And that's where the snowy had been spotted. So I went and looked Monday afternoon, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I looked every morning and every afternoon, could not find it. It had been seen for 3 or 4 days in a row before I flew out, and I couldn't find it. I had to fly home Friday night, but Friday morning, I couldn't stand the idea of going back to that airport again. So there's a place in Montana. If you haven't been, you need to go, or I think you should. It's Mission Valley in Montana. And Mission Valley is just spectacular for its raptor, the high raptor concentration, maybe the highest in the state. I was there one time for 2 hours, for 120 minutes, and saw 119 raptors. I mean, it's unbelievable. But on this particular day, when it was time to go back, I had about a 2.5 hour drive. So I typed in the address on Manning Road to get me back to the airport so I could look Friday afternoon and then catch my flight out. And then I stopped paying attention. I turned on a book on tape and started driving. And every once in a while, the car would say, make a right or make a left or go straight or whatever it would tell me. And when I looked up, I was in an awful lot of traffic. And this was the sign I was looking at: "Welcome to Canada." And I did not want to go to Canada. I had no desire or need to go to Canada, nor did I have a passport. So, but I had no way to turn around. I was inside on either side of the road. There are now fences. You're funneled in. You're basically a prisoner of Canada, even while you're in the States. So I get to the little gate. Now, we have all heard how kind and generous and empathetic Canadians are. Let me tell you, in my experience, that is BS. I get to this gate, and they are convinced that I'm an international thief or drug smuggler or gun runner or something, and wouldn't believe me that I was there by accident. And they spent 3 hours tearing down my car, looking for whatever they were looking for. And when they were done, they said, "Okay, you're clean, no problem. Put your car back together and you can circle around." Now, keep in mind, they share a building at this little tiny crossing with the U.S. Border Patrol, and it was a 100-yard U-turn. That's all I needed to do to make up for my mistake was a 100-yard U-turn. And then the Canadians handed me a paper and said, when you do your U-turn, give this to the U.S. side, and they will let you in. That also turned out to not be true. The U.S. side spent 2.5 hours tearing my car apart. So I spent 6+ hours on the border as time ticked away. And so I finally got back into the States and I was able to race back to the airport. It turned out the problem was there was a Manning Road at the airport, at the Flathead Lake Sky Ranch Airport. There's also a Manning Road in Alberta, Canada. Both of them were about 2.5 hours from where I was, and wasn't paying that much attention when it said, 2.5 hours away, and I just clicked go and off I went. And so that was my bad, my mistake. I raced back to the airport, got there just a little bit before dusk. I saw a car on the side of the dirt road, and you guys are all birders, so if there's a car on the side of the road, they're either broken down or they're on a bird. So I pulled up behind it and went and knocked on the window to see if the guy needed any help or if he'd seen the snowy owl. He rolled down the window and I asked him if he'd seen it, and he pointed to his right and he said, "Do you mean this one?" And 50 feet away on a shed, you can see the shingles there in a guy's backyard because all the homes were lying in the small airport. There was this absolute stunning, stunning snowy owls, and I just fell in love. But I took a couple of pictures, then I had to race to the airport and catch my flight home. I've seen a ton of snowy since, but that was my first, and that was the one that's in the book, and I was absolutely thrilled. There we go. They're just gorgeous, gorgeous birds. I was up last month working with Denver Holt. If you guys know him, he runs the Owl Research Institute, and he does two specialties, long-eared owls and snowy owls. He's been doing a snowy owl research study for 37 years. 37 straight years he's done. He's got more information on snowy owls than just about anybody in the world, and he's just a fun guy to work with. And he was kind enough to invite me up to work on long-eared owls for a couple of days, which was an absolute treat for me. Ferruginous pygmy owl, not one of the easy ones to get here in the States. Pretty easy in Central California, in Central America. I've seen it there a bunch of times, but not here in the States. The best place to find it in the U.S. is on the King Ranch in Texas. If you're not familiar with the King Ranch, it's massive. It's 825,000 acres. And if you don't know what 825,000 acres means, and I didn't, so that we're clear, the entire state of Rhode Island is 777,000 acres. This ranch, oh, hello, Kitty. This ranch is larger than the entire state of Rhode Island, and it's well known for ferruginous pygmy owls. So you can only go in if you book a guide. They have a staff guide. So I booked the trip, and there was a mother and son. She was probably 40, he was probably 20, that were on the trip. So it was the three of us, and it was great. We met before dawn. We piled into a van, driving around about an hour in. We heard a ferruginous, so that was great. But it wasn't, it's not what I wanted to count. An hour after that, we saw one, but we just saw it flying by. Did not get a great look at it. Countable, but not fantastic. An hour after that, now it's about 9:30 in the morning, maybe 10 o'clock. We're going to pull over and have a little brunch. So there's a picnic table out in the middle of nowhere on this ranch, and we get out and start unloading on this picnic table, and I sit down with my little brunch, and I look up, and on the other side of the bench, looking over the head of the two guests that were sitting over there, was this ferruginous pygmy owl sitting on this branch, no more than 20 feet away. It took us about 30, 35 minutes to eat. The bird never went anywhere. It preened, it actually fell asleep a little bit. It just hung out and gave us great looks. And I just thought that was an absolute blessing. I was so grateful for that, to get to see that ferruginous. Also, while I was on King Ranch, that's where I picked up my white-tailed hawk. If you're not familiar with white-tailed hawks, in Texas, their nickname is the fire hawk. And the reason for that is they have learned that as fires roll across the grasslands of Texas, everything tries to get out of the way of the fire, right? Animals are racing ahead of it or going down in their burrows. Insects, if they're capable, are taking to the sky, especially grasshoppers. White-tailed hawks have learned this, so they follow the trailing edge of the smoke and wait for these grasshoppers who, for one brief instant, think they've survived a disaster, only to be captured and eaten alive by a white-tailed hawk. And the guy named Tom, said that he has seen up to 12 white-tailed hawks trailing behind a fire at one time, picking off insects as they leap through the smoke. So I thought that was pretty cool. Now, I mentioned the people that I met and how valuable and important and fun and kind they were. This mother and son were that. The son's name was Frank Fabro. And actually, Carolyn, he was a student at UC Davis, and he was studying to be an ornithologist. That was his goal. And he's achieved that, but that at the time, that was his goal. And he said to me, "Hey, if you have trouble finding a spotted owl, let me know because my summer project last year, I went out and looked for spotted owl nests and marked them so that the loggers wouldn't cut down the trees within a quarter-mile square radius of wherever he found a nest." And he goes, "I'm not doing that this summer coming up, but I can still get you in and we'll find a spotted owl." So I did. I called him in June of that year. He's a great guy, and he wasn't anywhere near where we needed to go. It was a 3-hour drive for him, but he agreed to meet me. He wanted to meet at 5 in the morning, and he said, "You got to make sure you get the directions exactly perfect because there's no GPS there. There's no cell service, so you can't call me. If we don't connect, we're just not going to connect." Fortunately, the directions he gave were perfect. We connected. He had spent the night there sleeping in his car waiting for me. Just a really nice kid. So we pack up and we start hiking up this little hill. It's pitch black out, and it's not really a trail. I mean, unless you're a rabbit, it wasn't a trail. And we hike for about an hour, and then the sun's just starting to come up, and we're cresting this. Well, I called it a mountain. He called it a hill. That's the difference between being 70 and 20, I guess. And he said, "Okay, all we have to do now is make a right here and hike in about a half mile, and I'm pretty sure we'll find a nest." And I'm looking at an impenetrable wall of flora. I mean, it was trees and bushes and grasses, and I had no idea how we were going to get out. Now the sun's just starting to pop up, and I see him reach down to his right thigh, and he's got 2 machetes strapped to his right thigh. And he unstraps them and he hands me one and goes, "Start hacking. We got to cut our way through." And so we cut our way through about a half mile of forest, and suddenly we come out into this opening, which he knew where it was. I would have had no idea. And sitting in the middle of that opening is this spotted owl. Now, if any of you have gotten involved in horseback at any level, I don't know what was going on here, but this opening was 60 foot and perfectly round. I mean, it was like it was engineered. My daughter had a 60-foot round arena in our backyard when she was competing on horseback, and so I recognized the size and whatnot. And this bird was there, and so we sat down on the edge of the opening on a couple of stumps. And what you're looking at now, if the bird looks like it's staring at you, that's what it was doing when we were there. We sat there for almost 2 hours. We told stories. We ate breakfast. This bird preened, it napped. At one point, it actually dropped down and caught a mouse, came back up. We got to watch it eat it. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And when we were done, we turned away. I mean, it was within 20 feet of us the whole time. We turned away and started to hack our way through. And as far as I know, the bird never left. It certainly never got scared or agitated or anything. When we got back to the little rabbit trail, this is what was waiting for us, was a fledgling snowy. And this is what it looked like. It looks like a little fur ball. It looks like a child's toy. And it is just the cutest darn thing. So we were guessing that the owl, the adult one that I was showing you before, was one of the parents. And we might have been overthinking it, but thought, well, maybe it figured that if it kept our attention, we wouldn't be out bothering its fledge. But we got to come back and see this fledge, and it's just one of those great moments. Swallowtail kite, I love these birds. They're like Fred Astaire in a tuxedo. They're just spectacular. And we get them here in South Carolina. And one day my son and I were out on the lake in the pontoon boat, middle of the day, middle of the week, the lake's empty. And we just light up a cigar, turn off the boat, start floating in the middle of the lake. We're lying down on the benches and looking up, and 2 swallowtail kites fly overhead. I managed to snap this picture of one of them as it's flying overhead. And at that point, I had made 2 friends in the local birding club out here. I joined that. It was one of the ways I was trying to learn more. And I called them, and I was all excited. The swallowtail kites, 2 of them flew overhead. Da, da, da. And they both told me the same thing. Oh, Scott, you know what? With all due respect, you're pretty new and inexperienced, and that's not what you saw. They're because they've never been spotted on the lake before, and with all due respect, we're gonna have to figure out what it was, but that's not what it was. And they were not condescending; they were kind about it, but it was very clear that their years of experience. And so I had the picture, so I just texted each of them a picture, and they were both at the house within a half hour. That's they wanted to get a recording of a swallowtail kite on the lake because they both lived in the same county. So this is the first chapter of the book. The book is made up of 53 chapters, one chapter on each of the birds, and whatever my favorite or most enlightening or most dramatic connection with the birds were. But I opened with this because of that moment. And by the time we got back to the dock, the idea for the book was locked up, and we had come up with a name for it. So it was a pretty cool deal. We get them about 50 miles away from the house here. They come through during migration, and they come to the same farm every year. The farmer has been talked to by the local birding community and very generously does not till his fields until after the Mississippi and swallowtail kites come through on migration. And so they have a virtually unlimited source of grasshoppers, and it is just a blast to go up there. And so that is quite a bit of fun. Rocky Mountain National Park. This is a boreal owl. I got 4 small owls out of the 19 owls in Rocky Mountain National Park. I got the boreal owl, the northern saw-whet, the northern pygmy, and the flammulated. And I got those with the help of a gentleman named Scott Rashid. And Scott is a small owl expert. For the last 27 years, he has lived in Estes Park, which is the gateway to Rocky Mountain National Park. And he has studied the small mountain owls. And he is unbelievably good at it. He's published a book about each of them. And he is quite the expert on these things. And every fall for 27 years, he has done a banding station inside the park in coordination with the park. They give him a building to use from September 15th until the last day of October. My wife and I were there this year on September 15th. I think it's the 3rd year in a row because it's so much fun. And in the first hour, we got a boreal and a northern saw-whet, and I got to hold both. So that was pretty spectacular. Unfortunately, they did not get to finish this year because of the government shutdown. The national park had to excuse him from the park, but he'll be back at it next year if all goes well. This is a boreal owl, which looks a lot like a northern saw-whet. We'll see that. And they're tiny. If for those of you that remember the orange juice concentrate cans, which are roughly the size of a Coke can, a 12-ounce Coke can, that's what we use to take these birds. We put them inside there, and that's what we use to weigh them because the little orange juice can has already been pre-weighed, and so we know whatever's additional to that is how much the owl weighs. And then they can't hurt themselves because it's cardboard, so they're not going to cut themselves up. But it is amazing how tiny they are, and they don't weigh anything. I mean, they're virtually weightless, but they are vicious. They are amazing, amazing hunters, and it is a blast. Northern pygmy owl. This one was from Yellowstone. I mentioned earlier that a couple of our owls are diurnal. Northern pygmy is one of them. And excuse my French, but they are just badass. They don't seem to be afraid of anything. This bird, you can see it. It's just staring straight down at me. It's maybe 15 feet above me on this little tree on a snowy road in Lamar Valley in Yellowstone. And it didn't go anywhere. It just hung out. It was just the absolute coolest thing. I will mention, I told you I got all 4 of these birds at Rocky Mountain, and I've seen them all since, with the exception of the flammulated. I've still never physically seen a flammulated. It's the only one of the 53 that I did not put eyes on. Put ears on it 4 nights in a row in Rocky Mountain National Park and chased them up and down. Scott said they were small hills. I think they were tremendous mountains in the 14,000 foot range, but we chased those dang birds and never did get them. And so I've never seen them. And in the book, Why We Love Birds, I mentioned I interviewed 52 birders. I asked each of them the nemesis bird. For a lot of them, flammulated is their nemesis bird. They are just tough little boogers to find. But I will get it. I'm going to keep going. I'm not giving up. This is a northern saw-whet. As you can see, it looks a lot like the boreal owl. The biggest difference is the beak. Here you can see in the saw-whet, it's black. And if we back up, oh, we didn't back up. We went forward. Sorry about that. Had I backed up, and I will now, you can see that on the boreal, the beak is white or tan or ivory, depending on your color. And that is the dramatic and easy difference to tell between the two. One of the things I love about raptors, people ask me why I like raptors so much more than everything else. One of the big reasons is the eyes. I just absolutely love the eyes of raptors. I'm just fascinated with them, and thoroughly enjoy looking at those eyes. So let's move forward. Here we go. I apologize for the back and forth. I should just have a side-by-side shot. Cooper's hawk. This is a fun story about another person who is not a birder at all. This was taken at a place called Commissary Ridge, which is in Wyoming. And they have a banding station and a hawk watch. And I got invited to go up there. So I did. I drove from here to Wyoming and got there and set up my RV and unhooked my Jeep and got up early the next morning and followed the directions that they had given me to some dirt road leading up a mountain and whatnot. Could not find it for the life of me. Absolutely couldn't find it. Drove around for over an hour. I had no idea where to go or what to do. They were the same as the spotted owl guy. There's no Wi-Fi up there. There was no way to contact anybody. It was Thursday morning, and they only come down once a week, and it's on Wednesday afternoon. They're up there 6.5 days a week with no running water, no refrigeration, just living in a tent, either banding or watching hawks. Finally, I expanded my role, or expanded my search, and I found a beautiful gate, big, huge timber gate. I opened up the gate, let myself in, drove down about a mile, down a nice dirt road, and I pulled up. There was a magnificent log cabin. I'm talking 6,000 foot log cabin. And so I parked the Jeep and I walk up to the front door, and the doors are massive. There's two doors. They're each 4 foot wide. So the front door area is 8 foot, and they're both about 10 feet tall. So you can imagine how big those are, made out of solid wood. And I knock on the door, and slowly the door opens, and looking up at me is a little tiny woman. She was somewhere between 50 and 150 years old. She did not weigh 100 pounds. She was not 5 foot tall. And she looked up at me and smiled and lit up the entire valley. And she said, before I could say a word, she goes, "You looking for the birds?" And I said, "I am." "Yep, I get somebody here about every third week because they don't know how to tell people how to get there. So here's the deal. I'm a lonely old lady. You come in, have a sandwich, drink a glass of milk, listen to a couple of stories, and I'll give you the directions." And that's what we did, except for the milk. I can't stand milk. But I did. She made me a sandwich. She poured me milk and then a glass of water. She told me a couple stories about her ranch, and then she gave me absolutely perfect directions. And so when I got there and got to the top of the hill, right as I did, we captured this Cooper's hawk at the banding station, and I got to band it and hold it and release it, and it was a pretty cool deal. And I'm a big fan of the Cooper's hawks. We have them here on the property. But again, when we're talking about it, look at the eye, the orange and the black. I think it's just magnificent, and it's just part of the reason I'm attracted. Um, Red-tailed hawk. Red-tailed hawk's one of our more common raptors, and I'll share a story about why that is, how that came to be. The first story I'll tell you about red-tailed hawks is one that a lot of you probably know, but if you're watching a TV show or a movie or a television ad and you see a bald eagle and you hear that fierce war cry, that is not the bald eagle. That is a red-tailed hawk. And it is similar to, if you're familiar with it, there's something called the Wilhelm scream. In 1951, there was a movie called Distant Drum. It was the first movie where someone got shoved off a skyscraper and fell backwards, arms and legs flailing, and let out this scream. And the scream was recorded, and it is now still used in movies. It's called the Wilhelm scream. I have heard that there is a single recording of red-tailed hawks that is passed around among sound engineers, similar to the Wilhelm scream. I've not been able to confirm that yet, but I'm hoping to. I think it'll be pretty cool if I'm able to. But one of the reasons there are so many red-tailed hawks, other than they're brilliant hunters and resourceful, is due to President Dwight D. Eisenhower. He became president in 1952 following World War II. And one of the first things that he wanted to do was to build an interstate highway system from east to west and west to east. He did that for a couple of reasons. Number one, of course, to facilitate travel. Number two, because so many people were migrating from the east to the west, he wanted to make it safer. And number three, he needed a place in case we went to war with Russia where they could land planes. So there's, long straight parts of the highways that you could. Now, those were all the planned benefits of this. The unintended consequence, which in this case is a positive thing, is that what we created in doing these thousands of miles of roads, which took from the 1950s until 1996 to complete, by the way, long after Eisenhower's death, is we created a perfect red-tailed hawk habitat. We went through and we cut down forests and we drained marshes and we put in, grasslands and whatnot. So you got all your small mammals and small birds, and it's perfect for red-tailed hawks. The only thing that was missing were perches. So we went ahead and put perches every 100 yards over thousands and thousands of miles. We call them telephone poles or power lines, but for red-tailed hawks, they are perches. And as a result, their population exploded, absolutely exploded, and continues that way today. This is one from my front yard. We have a bird sanctuary on the property, and this is a red-tailed hawk in the fall. I understand that people see a lot of them. I think they're absolutely gorgeous birds. I truly do love them. You mentioned peregrine falcons, Carolyn. So peregrine falcons are a great story. They are now commonly known as urban falcons, and in large part because they can be found in every single major city in the United States. And there are two reasons for that. One is they are cliff nesters, and large cities have skyscrapers, have tall buildings, and peregrines think those are perfect for their to set up and breed. And so now all around the country, people are putting up peregrine falcon boxes in large buildings to attract the peregrine falcons. It turns out they're a big tourist attraction, especially in places like New York City. Every bridge connecting Manhattan to the mainland has peregrine falcons nesting underneath it, and there are a number of them nesting throughout the city. The other reason is they love pigeons. And guess what most large cities have? They have a wild buffet of pigeons for peregrines. So their population is exploding. We nearly lost them due to DDT, but when we banned DDT, they made a comeback, and now their comeback is exploding. In your state, Torrey Pines, which is down south by San Diego, if you're familiar with it, it's a little state park down there, and they get two nests of peregrines every year. They've got a small cliff about 50 feet out up from the ocean. It's not very high. It's maybe 150 feet. And these peregrines are right there. And they're there every year. They're much closer than they normally are in the wild, but there are so many shorebirds for them to eat. They don't even pretend to compete. And they successfully nest almost every year. And they're beautiful. If you love peregrines, and apparently you guys do because you're making a trip to look for them, head on down to Torrey Pines. And if you can do it during breeding season around April, I think you'll be blessed. The other raptor that we nearly lost to DDT is the bald eagle, which has made a tremendous comeback. This shot is from a place called the Conowinga Dam. Conowinga Dam is in Maryland, about 45 minutes northeast of Baltimore on the Susquehanna River. And in the fall, particularly in November, and I will be there again this November, the shad run upriver, same way the salmon do on the West Coast. But nobody cares about shad, so nobody's building stairways or anything to help them make it. So they actually have to go through the turbines to try to get through. And as they do, of course, a number of them are knocked unconscious or killed. And bald eagles, as you know, are not diving birds, they are surface birds. So they find unconscious and recently killed fish, and they collect by the hundreds. And you can take these shots all day long if you want. There are beautiful juveniles there, and the fishing shots, they're unlimited. You can take this shot 150 times in the course of a day. It's a power plant, and it's a secured power plant. So as a civilian, you can't get in except when the shad are running in November, and then the people who run the power plant with whatever permissions they need open up part of the power plant that runs along the river. There's a sidewalk and about a 2-foot chain link fence. and you can get there at sunrise and stay all day long. There's no, you don't have to fill out any forms. You don't pay anything. You just go and park and do it. And I'll go there and get there at sunrise and set up my chair and my lunch pail and my cameras and stuff and hang out and stay there till dusk. And you get all kinds of birding enthusiasts and photographers, and it's a really, really special way to spend a day. I absolutely love it. The other thing that's fairly common there are the double-crested cormorants. And so they are, diving to catch the shad that lived and come up. But when they come up like this one that you see here, which is swallowing a shad, it has got to swallow it quick because as soon as they break the surface of the water, the bald eagles are pouncing on them trying to steal the bird. So it is a fascinating battle to watch between the cormorant's ability to eat quickly and the bald eagle's ability to steal. Osprey, I love osprey. They're just spectacular birds. This is at a place called Sebastian Inlet, which is in Florida, about 20 minutes north of Vero Beach and 20 minutes south of Melbourne Beach. And I believe that it is the premier place in the country to watch osprey hunt. When the mullet run, which is in October, and the mullet run from the Indian River Lagoon, which is about 150 miles long, and through four little narrow inlets, Sebastian Inlet being the most accessible and has a jetty on both sides. And there are dozens of osprey there that are hunting. And you'll see them. I've seen them take two mullet at a time. I've spoken to people who have seen them take three. I've not personally witnessed that. But they are just the coolest of birds. They're the only diving raptor. So other raptors that will take fish like a bald eagle or even a couple of our owls, it's all surface stuff. An osprey can dive up to 2.5, some say 3 feet deep to grab a bird. They're the only bird whose eyesight and experience adjust for refraction. So they can tell where the bird actually is, not where it appears to be. They have a pure sushi diet, which I love. Sashimi, technically. I don't think they eat rice, but I absolutely love that about them. They have their own family, one of only two raptors that does, the Northern Harrier and the Osprey. And they every time they catch a fish, they flip it head forward. If you watch them, they're always flipping it head forward. And they are the one raptor that when they go to migrate, takes a sack lunch with them. The last thing they do before they take off for their long migratory flight is grab one more fish, flip it head forward, give themselves a little shake, and take off on migration. They're just cool birds all the way around. This one's from my backyard. You can't see it, but he had a fish, and he was not happy that I was standing underneath him. And here they are. This is at Sebastian Inlet. 50-mile-an-hour dive. They're just gorgeous, spectacular birds. Great gray owl. This is at Yellowstone National Park, and I try to go every January. It is I think, one of the most special places in the world, at least that I've ever been. And plus, when you go in January, you can almost be alone in the park. And on this particular day, I had a ranger pull me over and talk to me for a little bit and said I was the only guest in the park in all of Yellowstone. You compare that to a summer day when they average 17,000 visitors a day. But on this particular midweek day, and it was minus 25 degrees. So my wife said, really, you were the only one dumb enough to be in the park. Ranger asked why I was there, and I said I wanted to see owls and wolves. He said, how about if I get you on a great gray owl? And I said, well, that would be amazing. So he gave me directions for a great gray owl that was a half an hour away. And I thought, what are the odds that I would get the directions that precise and get them right, and that the owl would still be there? But it was. And when I got there, I got to watch it for 2 full hours. I watched it hunt 3 times, once successfully. And as you know, great gray owls can hear small mammals up to 2 feet underneath the snow. And they dive in feet first and grab them. And it's just truly amazing. It's a terrible picture because of the snow and stuff. But nonetheless, it was a great day. And one of the places that I spent some time at was Sac Sim Bog in Minnesota. Excuse me, outside of Duluth. If you haven't been, it's generally the spot to find owls, specifically winter owls in the U.S. great gray, boreal, snowy, northern hawk, northern saw-whet barred, and as you can see here, a couple of great horned. Um, the last time I was up there, leave before dawn. You want to get there before dawn and see if you can get them right at that time. And when I pulled up into the park, it was minus 36 degrees. And for a California boy, that's considered quite chilly. I've been asked a number of times if I chase rarities. I do, but only raptors. I don't bounce around the country. Now, if I'm somewhere already on a trip and there's a rarity and it's within 100 miles or something, I'll go take a peek. But otherwise, I just chase raptors. Roadside hawk made an appearance in Texas a while back. They do that every few years. Bat falcon made an appearance 3 years ago. First time it had been seen there in a number of years. And I absolutely love them. Both those birds are common in Mexico and Central America, but to see them in the US is highly unusual. Now, the next picture I'm going to show is by far the worst picture that I took, and I'll explain why I include it nonetheless. That is a stellar sea eagle. And if you remember about 3 or 4 years ago, a stellar sea eagle made its way across the Bering Sea, went through Alaska, made it to the east coast of Canada, and 2 winters in a row it dropped down into Maine. And you would go to a place called the Arrowsick Bridge. And it's a bridge that goes over a small river. And exactly a mile north of the bridge is where that eagle hung out for 2 winters in a row. So this shot is literally 1 mile away, which I hope helps explain why it's a terrible shot. But it's the only shot I could get of that dang bird. It would never fly any closer to the bridge, or at least it didn't. I spent a total of about 6 or 7 days there. So a couple things in the picture, other than the fact that there's a stellar seagull, and even in this picture, you could see how massive it is. You get a sense of size of the beak. But to give you 2 points of reference, the bird that it's standing on is a Canada goose that it took out of the air. Imagine how big you have to be as a raptor to take a Canada goose. And the little bird in front of it, that's a full-grown bald eagle. Stellar sea eagles weigh more than 50% more. An adult female stellar weighs more than 50% more than an adult female bald eagle. They are just, bald eagles cap out at around 13 pounds, and stellar sea eagles can get up to about 22, 23 pounds. When that bird took off, it looked like a jet. It was just amazing to watch. So if it makes its way back, which it hasn't for the last 2 years, but if it makes its way back, it's well worth seeing. Northern hawk owl. This is from Wise River, Montana. It's the last of the 53 birds that I got. I got a call. Somebody said, hey, there's a northern hawk owl in Wise River, Montana. You got to get up there and see it. My wife put me on a flight the next day. I did. I got there. I allowed 4 days to find the bird. The first afternoon when I drove, it was like a 3-hour drive from the airport. Then I got there. Well, I don't need to check into the hotel. I'll start looking. And I go down a dirt road. Haven't even gotten to the little tiny town yet, but I go down a dirt road. And sure enough, there are 2 cars on the side of the road. And I'm thinking, it cannot be this easy. I pull up behind the 2 cars. Dirt road's about 15 feet wide. So we're on the right-hand side. So the driver's side is facing the road or opens to the road. And as I get out, they do the whisper sign, so I don't make any noise. And I have my camera, and they point to an unused telephone pole directly across the street. So less than 15 feet away and about 20 feet high. And this northern hawk owl was sitting on that pole. And it let us watch it for about 2 hours. It dropped and hunted a couple times. This is one of the times where I was able to get that shot. And I fell in love with this bird. I went back the next morning and got there at dawn. Nobody else was there. The other 2 cars hadn't returned. And I was there by myself. And sure enough, the bird was on the telephone pole. So I get out of the car. I don't even grab my camera. I figure I'd gotten my pictures the day before. And I slide down the side of my car, and I'm resting against the rear bumper. And I'm just looking up and watching this bird. And I'm doing this for over an hour. And the bird doesn't do anything. It's not hunting. It's not preening. It's just there. It doesn't look agitated or nervous. It's kind of watching me. And all of a sudden, with, to me, no warning, I imagine to a prey, there would have been warning. It dropped down from this telephone pole. Let's call the pole 20 feet high. And it drops like a rock. And it gets to 1.5 feet above the dirt on the road and does a 90-degree turn and comes straight at me. And with its left wing, it brushes my left leg. And then it takes off and it flies across an open prairie. And I looked for 3 more days, 2.5 more days. I never saw it again. I'm not a religious man. I'm a spiritual man. And this was a spiritual moment. I have asked so many raptor experts since then, is there a rational explanation for what that bird did? And none of them have an answer. And I just think the bird was saying goodbye. I think we'd spent, 3 or 4 hours together total, and it was just its way of saying, you know what, you're okay. And that was the highlight of my year. And that was why that northern hawk owl, and this is the bird here, wound up on the cover of my book. And was my 53rd bird. The book, by the way, you can get at Amazon if you have an interest. I have another book coming out in April called Why We Love Birds that I've mentioned. Ken Kaufman and Cy Montgomery and Scott Weidenstall and Pete Dunn and Debbie Shearwater and Chris Cooper. All the great birders are in it. It's going to be an awful lot of fun. And if you want to hear any of those people, they've all done my podcast, Naturally Scott. And I do it weekly. I do it on Thursdays. We have a new episode releasing tomorrow. And we've been doing it about 5 months. We're already in the top 25% of podcasts in the world because people like you are watching it and seem to be enjoying it. The one favor I would ask, if I could be so bold, Carolyn, is that if anybody does go to YouTube and look at it, please hit subscribe. Every time you do, YouTube pushes it out to more people. And the more people that can see our birding stories and our animal stories, the better it is, and the more guests I can draw in. There's no cost or anything, but it's a real benefit to us when that happens. And now, this is my email. If anyone has any questions, at any point, please email me. I'm happy to answer them. I'm thrilled to answer them. If you think of something that you didn't ask tonight or you don't want to ask it, no problem. People ask me about my photography and what rules and how I do it. I have 2 rules on my photography. The only 2 things I do to my photographs are I will crop them and I will do minor color changes. And what I mean by that is I'll just heat something up or cool it down a little bit. I won't fake colors and I won't add a branch or delete a branch or anything like that. If you see a shot, that's a shot I took. So in this case, this ferruginous hawk, pretty close to you guys, by the way, this is Pinnacles National Park. That is the color of the sky. That is the hawk. That is the post that it was on. That is the yellow sign that was there. This is the only one of my photos I've ever doctored. In real life, that sign says high voltage. But here, because it's the last slide of the night, I switched it to thank you, which is what I want to say to Carolyn and everybody in your society. And now, if anyone has any, I am thrilled to answer your questions.
Yeah, so folks, feel free to chime in if you've got questions or drop them in the chat. Happy to read them out. While you're kind of percolating on your thoughts and bringing your questions together, Scott, did you have any white whales for this project?
Meaning like a nemesis, like something I didn't
Yes.
get? Yeah, the closest was the flammulated owl, which I heard multiple times, but have still never seen. If I have more of a global nemesis or white whale, it's the harpy eagle. Um, and funny because Elizabeth Gray, who is the woman that runs the National Audubon Society, that is her nemesis bird as well. So we're trying to make plans to get down to Panama and see if we can't both get on a harpy eagle. But no, I managed to get all 53, 52 eyes on and 1 heard only.
Nice. Were there
Not, by the way, let me finish. Not without a tremendous amount of help, by the way. I had so many people who were so kind to put me on birds. I need to say that because I don't want to pretend that, 6 months or a year into my birding world that I was that good of a birder. I was not.
I think one of the great things that you discover the more you do birding and travel with birding is just how excited birders are to share their knowledge with folks. I've done some trips across the country, and all it takes is me just sending an email to their local chapter, and they're perfectly willing to tell me about their field trips or set me up with someone to do some local birding. It's a really great resource.
I found the exact same thing, and I think in large part because it's not a zero-sum game. It doesn't take away from my having seen a bird if I share that bird with you. As a matter of fact, I think it enhances it. I think a lot of the people that I had the pleasure of birding with and that were helping me on the trip, I think they got more joy out of putting me on the bird than they did seeing the bird themselves. So you're right. The spirit is quite generous across the country, um, and uh, and I was a grateful recipient of that.
Yeah. Right. All right, folks in our audience, do we have any questions for Scott? Or are we just enjoying the good vibes tonight? We're enjoying the good vibes tonight.
Fair
Um,
enough.
I will mention if anybody is looking to find a Ferruginous hawk, I believe the one that hangs out in Coyote Valley is still in residence at this time of the year. And then of course if oh, we do have a question from Cody. Any country you have not visited yet but are planning to in the near future?
Well, my wife and I are going to Ecuador and across to the Galapagos in September, so that is a place we have never been before, and I'm pretty excited about that. And we just got back from a trip from Africa. We went down to Kenya and Tanzania, so I do not have nearly the time or money to see all the places I want to see, but I'm going to guess that's true for just about everybody. So I am blessed with a wife that is generous in allowing me to do these trips. Because of the books I'm writing, I take at least one trip every month, somewhere around the country or around the world, to work on either birds or mammals. And so I am I am blessed. I cannot believe that my publisher and the IRS are offsetting my vacations, and both of them calling it work. So that is a true joy for me. Matter of fact, I leave next week. I'm flying into Kansas City and I'm going to Missouri to Lowe's Bluffs to see hopefully a million snow geese, and then up to the Platte River in Nebraska to see maybe 600,000 sandhill cranes. And those will each be a chapter in another book that I'm working on called American Safaris.
Wonderful.
So, but it's work. In case the IRS is listening,
Yes,
100% work.
100% business the whole
There
time.
we go.
No enjoyment.
Nope.
Eric is wondering, how many raptor species are in the whole world, and are you looking to maybe search them out next?
You know what? There's a little over 500. And at one point, I had the grandiose idea of doing that. But I realize I'm closer to the finish line than I am to the starting line. And my wife is generous in that she'll go on about half the birding trips with me, especially if I lie and tell her they're not birding trips. But yeah, I wanted to, and I'm not going to. I'm not going to. I did spend a few days with a man who has seen all but 14 of them.
Wow.
He has seen, I don't know what the exact numbers, like 540 that he's seen, and there's 14 that he hasn't. But he was telling me, he goes, I'm just tired. I've been chasing birds for over 60 years, and it's time for me and my wife just to relax. So those birds are going to go unseen,
Yep.
which is, in some ways, that's a really neat approach.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So,
I can understand if that's the thing you do your entire life. What happens if you see those last 14?
yep, yep, yeah. What do I guess you go after woodpeckers next.
Yeah, yeah, or warblers. Wonderful. Oh my goodness. Scott, thank you so much for joining us this evening. This was a fantastic talk. I know I'm going to be checking out your Raptor Quest book, and we're looking forward to when your anthology of birders on birding comes out.
Well, that comes out in April, and I'm pretty excited about it. And actually, you guys have a new birding festival starting next April, outside of Hollister, called the Fault Line Birding Festival, that Debbie Shearwater is putting on.
Yeah.
And that's a year from April. I'm going out this April to spend a week out there on the ranch where the festival is going to be held. They're having a handful of photographers in to take some pictures they could use for their promo materials. But if Debbie's putting it on, it's going to be an awesome thing. So hopefully, I'm not telling tales out of school. I don't think it's a secret, but if it was, it no longer is.
Yep. Excellent. Well, Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, folks. We will see you next week, next month for speaker series. Oh, I'm sorry. We have one last question before we sign off. For birding in foreign countries, do you just wing it, or are you making your own plans, or traveling solo? Or are you going with guides or companies?
All of the above. So I don't use tour groups much anymore. Just because everybody that's on those groups wants to bird in a different way. It's not better or worse. It's just different. And you're kind of taking the average of what everybody wants to do, and that doesn't work. But what I will do when I go to a foreign country for the first time is I will definitely hire a guide for the first day. And rather than look for specific birds, I'm having them show me the great places to go. And then I'll spend the rest of my time going to those places on my own. And I actually do that here in the States too, although I've been most places now. But certainly early on, I would do that. The first time I would go to an area, I like to get a guide, let them save me a lot of wear and tear as far as, you mentioned casually a canyon where you could find a ferruginous hawk. Well, shoot, without my knowing that, I might search for 2 days for that hawk. But if I called you, Scott, you go up the road 3/4 of a mile, and that's where it's been seen
I can
7 of
give
the
you the
last
cross
15 days.
streets.
There you go. There you go. So yeah, but once I've done that, once I've taken advantage of that knowledge, and learned some of the local flair, unless I'm birding with friends, I'm quite happy to go out by myself. Because part of my birding, I'm very content to pull up a chair and light a cigar and watch birds for a couple hours without moving. It is a very enjoyable thing for me. But for example, people on tour groups, that is not what they want to do. That is just not their thing. So there you go.
Wonderful.
All right, I will tell you before I let you go, I've been giving this lecture for about 2 years now, and I've probably given it 100 times. You are the first group that I've given it to that did not ask me what kind of photography equipment I use. So I'm going to make a note, and I can no longer say to the next person who asks that question, well, thank goodness you asked it because every group has. So you guys have a distinction. I don't know if it's positive or negative, but nonetheless, it is the distinction.
We'll
So
take it. I think oh, darn it. You took the question out of Vina's mouth.
is that really what she wants to know?
I don't know. She's giving me a winky face.
Oh, okay. All right. Guys, thanks so much for having me. I know I like your sense of humor. All right, you guys have a great night and thank you very much.
All right. Have a good evening, everybody.